Room 442 is brought to you by North Star Bets. That's a win.
The Champions League final is set in Istanbul. It will be Inter Milan versus Manchester City. This is Room 442. I'm Sarah Pararia, joined with Mikey Singh. Mikey, Manchester City absolutely demolished Real Madrid in the second leg of that semifinal. 4-0.
Yeah, it felt like a little bit of them exercising their demons in such an emphatic fashion that really does make you believe that this Manchester City team is going to go all the way, it feels like. I mean, just such a clinical performance from so many individuals. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Erling Haaland, maybe wasn't his best match, but he's still a nuisance up top for Manchester City. I mean, they dominated Real Madrid from beginning to end, it really felt like.
It's funny because you mentioned Erling Haaland, but even Kevin De Bruyne, I think it's fair to say that it wasn't his, best performance. Not that it was bad, but there were other players that were, Rodri, John Stones, Kyle Walker had Vinicius Jr. in his pocket there. You didn't hear anything about Vinny Jr., but I think the first half of this match was some of the best football I've seen this year and recently in these past couple of years. It was so dominant. I don't know if you saw that stat, but Real Madrid were averaging like less than a pass every 15 passes that City had or something. Like it was, and the percentage going into halftime, Real Madrid 1 shot, City 11. Possession was 80% for City. Like it was so dominant from City. When they lost the ball, they would go and get it back immediately. There was no chance. And Bernardo Silva stepping up. We've criticized him a little bit this season, kind of, after the World Cup, he was very quiet, wasn't playing as many games for City, but brilliant today.
Yeah, he reminded everyone why he's so highly touted and why, there are teams around the world that are really interested still in Bernardo Silva, including, obviously, Manchester City, who definitely want to bring him back. I mean, I think Pep Guardiola made a purpose of almost targeting Real Madrid's left-hand side with Camavinga and David Alaba, and it worked. I mean, that they had a rough match themselves. Obviously, they had a lot to deal with in that area of the pitch, but Bernardo Silva stepped up and Kevin De Bruyne right beside him. I felt like the two linked up fairly well. And Manchester City overall, I mean, what is there left to say about them? They're the best team in the world right now. Pep Guardiola has them rounding into form.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit of Pep Guardiola, but let's talk first about Real Madrid. We give this team so much credit, and they deserve it for what they've done in the Champions League in the recent years that we've seen. But, today they were completely exposed. Carlo Ancelotti, after the game, was also quite honest and basically said they were the better team. Here's what Ancelotti had to say after the match.
I think that tonight Man City deserved to win because they played better than us. And so last season was different. This season they deserved to reach the final and to fight for the final. They were better than us, as we were better than them last season.
Very matter of fact about it, but I have a question for you. Were we giving Real Madrid maybe a little bit too much credit, considering this season only, considering in La Liga they've been underperforming, and were we thinking just because it was the Champions League and this is their trophy and they know how to win in tournament style football? But when we look at them in La Liga, we've seen their errors, we've seen their flaws. Were we overlooking that a little bit too much? Because, after what City did to them.
Yeah, it's definitely a humbling for Real Madrid in this tournament. Were we overlooking them? Maybe a bit, like we're overrated them a little bit, but like you said, it's Champions League football. Real Madrid, it's not like it was just a one-off year where it was a fluke and they made a run to the Champions League. They've done this perennially every single time. Even last year, when you look at Karim Benzema and the performance that he put in, all three of those games, including the one against Chelsea, I'll even throw in there, I'd say that Real Madrid was the underdog, and yet they find a way to beat Chelsea. They find a way to beat Manchester City. They find a way to beat Liverpool. I don't think they were the better side in each of those games. So were we overrating them? Perhaps, because you're right, they haven't had a great domestic season, but still you can't overlook this team in the Champions League, and I'll say the same thing next season.
Did Ancelotti make a mistake by not starting Rudiger?
Based on, hindsight's 2020, so yes, obviously. David Alaba wasn't really up to the task of just this match in general. Rudiger obviously dominated Haaland last time out, held Haaland to nothing. Haaland, again, didn't really have too much in this game, But still, I think Rudiger's presence, his fight, I think he earned another start. But yeah, maybe in hindsight they did. What do you think?
I think if it was working, why would you change it? And no disrespect to Militao, we know he's one of the top defenders right now in all of Europe, but Rudiger was fantastic, and we've not really seen Holland get marked by a defender so well and was silenced so much that I'm kind of thinking, why would you change it if it was working? And worst case scenario, subs can be made. Excuse me, I do think that maybe there was a mistake there, but I also don't think one change would have, allowed Real Madrid to win this.
The tie,
exactly. But let's now look to Manchester City. Yeah, Pep Guardiola, what he's done with this team, it seems, the way he's moved players around, brought players in. I mean, Jack Grealish, fantastic. There was a stat about him, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but since 2003-2004, Jack Grealish has now created the most chances in the Champions League for any English footballer. He has grown immensely at Manchester United.
Manchester City.
Sorry, Manchester City.
I wish it was Manchester United
I know
right
you
now.
do.
Well, yeah, it goes. I mean, we got to give Pep a lot of credit for this. First, Grealish, yeah, it's is he living up to his what was it, £80 million price tag? Probably not quite yet. It might even be more than that. Probably not quite yet, but that's okay because he's still a really brilliant footballer. And what Pep Guardiola has done, not just Grealish, but we talk about Bernardo Silva, we talk about Riyad Mahrez, we talk about Phil Foden. The ability to rotate your squad and still have everybody playing at the top of their level, that's a skill on its own. And the fact that he's been able to do that, and some days you look at their squad and it's completely different from their last game, completely different from their game before. Pep Guardiola has done such a good job of just building his side up to become like a really cohesive unit. I mean, we saw on the weekend Kevin De Bruyne wasn't even in their starting 11, yet still they go and they have a convincing performance. So yeah, he's done a really good job with their squad.
Well, let's hear what the manager had to say after the match against Real Madrid.
It's really tough, lose the way we lose, and I think in that moment you have to swallow poison, you have to swallow everything and be kind. In football and sport always give you another chance. And when the draw with Madrid, I said, yeah, I want it. I want it because then I think today was there, everything. The energy that we had last season during 1 year, that being criticized these players, but didn't have character, didn't have anything. When we lose because it's football, we spoke just before to go to the pitch. We spoke and said, do you want to play against Inter or not? Do you want to play against Inter? Yeah or no? Ask yourself. If you play 90 minutes thinking, I want to play against Inter, you will beat Real Madrid. In the bad moments, if you want to play against Inter de Milan, you are going to win the game. And they play in that spirit that we need to do.
Well, I guess they will be playing Inter. I mean, I think he has so much. That post-match press conference, he's very confident, light, because I think he knows that performance was complete.
Yeah, it was, again, this moment for Manchester City is so big because, okay, they've gone to a Champions League final in the past, but to do so in this fashion, I think they did it in the COVID season, so, a bit of an asterisk on that Champions League final, but to do so against Real Madrid and exercise, like I said off the top, exercise their demon from last year in the fashion that they did, he has a right to be smiling right now. I didn't realize all it took was to think that they're going to face Inter, and that's all they needed to get to the Champions League final, but it is what it is. It sets up a final in which Manchester City head into as heavy favorites. Heavy
favorites. One thing, lastly, I want to ask you. I've heard a lot of rumors, seen it on Twitter. Manchester City, this squad is being compared to a 2009 Barcelona. When you look at these sides, do you see similarities? Do you think that Manchester City can live up to what that Barcelona team was? Of course, they beat Manchester United in that final in a very dominant performance as well. Do you think it's similar?
It's in the same category, I would say. Barcelona, I mean, there's a bit that team, the romantic in me, you love that Barcelona team. You love the way that Pep had them playing football and essentially changing the game when it came to the way that the world sees football. Is this Manchester City's team doing similar things? Yeah, not quite on the level that Barcelona was doing it, but they go out, they win the treble, become the second English team ever to win the treble.
That's right.
The continental treble, at least. what happens next year, I think if they do it again, then you have to start having those conversations.
That's exactly what I said. I said I need to see this Manchester City side do this for just a little bit longer, because we have to remember Barcelona won the treble 2008, 2009. Did it again in 2014, 2015. And during that whole...
3 straight league titles too, though.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think it is.
Too.
I think it is. I mean, maybe we're talking about one of the best managers ever at this point.
For
but
sure.
Manchester City are heading to Istanbul. They'll be taking on Inter Milan. The final is June 10th. And here in room 442, we'll be breaking that down for several weeks ahead as we look to the final and hope for some really, really good football here.
Room 442 is brought to you by North Star Bets. That's a win.